So back in June, I moved back to Kerry with the intention of selling my land. But now that I'm back and my land looks like this, I decided not to sell because I have so many plans. And I've been quite busy. I haven't been putting up videos. I've been pruning trees. I've started a great project where I started setting trees and rediscovering trees that I planted many years ago. But one of the more interesting things of moving home is that I've been living without electricity for the last 6 months. So things like the length of the day, the cycle of the seasons, the cycle of the moon and the stars are really now much more intrinsic in my life rather than just having them interesting. In a way, I'm not just learning how the Celts lived, I'm living in the way that the Celts learned. Samhain is upon us, and for me it really is the end of the harvest, the end of the summer, and the dark times coming in. And even growing up on the farm here, my dad, we'd have the hay in, we'd have the oats in, we'd have the potatoes, the mangels, the turnips in, the turf down. My dad would also get 100 of mackerel, clean them out, salt them and put them in a barrel. So everything was kind of like closing in for the winter ahead. And his lifestyle would change even because my dad would have certain people that he'd work with during the harvest, the mehel, I suppose. But they were not necessarily next door to him. They were a group of friends, really, people that got on. And he mightn't see them over the winter because everybody was kind of staying in their own little patch. And to me, that Samhain, the bringing in of darkness, is a chance and a time for reflection, for depression, for grief. And I suppose in society we all see these things as really bad now. Well, depression and grief, well, not bad, but just try and get over them as quickly as possible. Whereas I think the Celts actually gave themselves this time to go into the dark places of their mind, to go into the dark places of their life and stay there for a while, invite them in almost, but knowing that spring was coming again, that there was hope, but just to flirt with despair, I suppose. And it seems in a way a better way of being. You know, in society today, everything is bigger, stronger, more. Everybody has to be ambitious. Everybody has to be on top form and move ahead. Where actually, this is the time of year that maybe you don't have to be ambitious or happy or wonderful. You might stay in bed longer. And again, giving yourself the chance to do that, reflect upon it, maybe work on issues that you need to work on, and be ready again on the 1st of February. And I think that is the real message of Iha Hauna, the night of Halloween. Of course, what we have, Halloween, is almost a product of Samhain. And how that came about is Samhain and the whole idea of the end of the harvest and the big celebration went to America with all the different races around Europe, all the Celtic tribes. And a lot of the Christians over there really didn't want these celebrations of Samhain. And of course, somehow Christianity never really gets the human condition because they started saying, oh, this is all about ghosts and ghouls and people dress up really crazy and play tricks on each other. And of course, that's what people love. There's a part of us that just loves all that. So people were kind of, instead of saying, oh no, I'm not going, they were kind of going, where is it on? So it has become huge. The product that is Halloween is huge in people's minds. And people love that idea. And they love the darkness and the trickery and the idea of magic, you know. And of course, part of the whole Samhain thing, and I really do believe this, is the invitation of grief. Because can you imagine if somebody died, say May, June, July, when there was an awful lot of work to be done, I suppose people couldn't grieve properly because they really, this harvest, these crops, these animals had to be tended, things had to be done. But now this time of the year when everything was done, they could maybe go back and revisit that loss, that death, that tragedy, and feel the sadness. But also, you see, I hear a lot of people saying Samhain is when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. But we always assume that it's the dead pushing their way into our realm. But maybe the Celts actually spent a lot of time harking back to the other realm and wishing, talking to the dead, talking to their ancients and seeing how they did over the year and making plans for the next year. And I think that's where the whole idea of the dead walking on Ia Haun comes from, is that people really accepted that. And as well, they would make biscuits and treats and stuff for the dead. And that's how trick-or-treating happened, because they would leave a plate of very nice food for the dead. And again, human nature being what it is, somebody would come along and eat it. And so they weren't too sure. So then people started going around pretending to be the dead, and they would get the soul food, the soul biscuits to eat. And that's how trick-or-treating came about. Again, I was saying it's going into the dark realms of your mind, dark realms of life, dark realms of humanity. And that, of course, is the subconscious, where all the imagination lies, all the fantasies lie. So there is a part of it about kicking up your heels and dressing up. Now, as well, I was reading recently where somebody was saying that Halloween is a suspension of time, where for 3 nights things are kind of stopped. So that's how people dressed up as well, because it didn't matter what age you were, it didn't matter what status you had, it didn't matter how rich you were, it didn't matter who was the boss and who was the servant, that people could play tricks on each other because everything was suspended. These tricks were like within reason, it wasn't going up and taking the head off somebody. And I think that's how the trick came into it, and that whole feeling of magic about Halloween. But I really feel now, from living in the darkness, I don't think it was a suspension of time over 3 nights. I think it was over 3 months. Because this time of year you can really feel the end of the harvest, the end of the power working and getting everything done. And it stops. And it doesn't really feel like New Year. The New Year is the 1st of February, when you celebrate the regrowth and the coming of Bridget and all that. So I think these 3 months are there as a kind of a leveller, to give yourself that chance again to investigate those dark parts of your life that you try not to visit. I mean, nobody wants to feel grief, nobody wants to feel depressed, but by pushing it away, it bounces back a little bit quicker. So by just inviting it in for a little while and having a little investigation, it seems to be that little bit better. And of course, they had the solstice when the wheel of the year turned and the days started getting longer again, which was a huge beacon of hope. And it was a wonderful, again, 3 days of a celebration, a minor celebration in a way, because they couldn't splurge out because they didn't know how long they needed the food for. But it was a beacon of hope. And of course that has come into Christmas, which is a wonderful holiday as well. But the only thing is with commercialism, that Christmas is encroaching more and more on top of this dark time of the year. So we don't give ourselves chance. We don't have that time to breathe, because as soon as a lot of places have Christmas going already, so it's bump 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 and you're straight into it. And then in January, that's when people really feel the down, because they haven't had chance to do it in a more natural way from Samhain and build along. So the best way, I think, to celebrate Samhain is go trick-or-treating, get dressed up, have a wonderful time, kick your heels, and then give yourself that time to investigate. Agus tá súla gom go bhfuil oíche tháinig go maith le gceach duine. Slán in isis.